Hi everyone, and welcome to BioBytes. I'm your host, Mars, and I'm joined today with a guest.
Hey, my name is Zach, and thank you for having me on the show.
Today, we are diving deep into a controversial topic, synthetic biology and genetic engineering in the UK. With advancements in gene editing and synthetic biology growing rapidly, there is an important discussion to be had about where the UK stands in terms of regulation and how this stands internationally. So, let's start with the basics. What exactly is synthetic biology?
So, synthetic biology is the design and engineering of biological systems, modifying genes to create new biological functions. However, the UK Parliament describes it this way, but it's important to note that this is not the legal definition. It's just a way to help MPs understand the science behind it and help them make policies. So there's already some ambiguity of the topic that's arising. The only thing we have is the definition from the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, written in a post note which purpose is just to add information rather than proper legislation.
That's an important distinction. Now, the Genetic Technology Act of 2023 sets clear guidelines on what's allowed. Could you break that down for us?
Yeah, of course. The law permits gene editing only under strict conditions. If a genetic change could also happen through traditional breeding methods, then it's allowed. In plants and animals, these methods include sexual fertilization, in vitro fertilization, spontaneous mutation, which is naturally occurring random changes in organisms' DNA, embryo rescue, grafting, which is transplanting living tissue, induced mutagenesis or somatic hybridization, which is creating a new hybrid cell through fusing separate protoplasms which can grow into a new hybrid plant cell. Anything that involves introducing foreign DNA from another species is prohibited.
So things like natural mutations, artificial insemination, and embryo transfer are fine, but transgenesis, which is the process of adding genes from a different species, is not?
Yeah, exactly. The government wants innovation in genetic research, but the main interpretation of their published legislation, in my opinion, appears to be quickening biological outcomes which could have already occurred given more time, rather than creating new, unprecedented organisms.
Okay, so let's talk about the red lines. What genetic modification is strictly forbidden in the UK?
So yeah, this is a very big part. There are 5 major bans which the UK government appears to be really strict on. Firstly, we have transgenesis. As previously mentioned, this is the process of inserting DNA from one species to another. This links in with the idea of maintaining traditional methods. Creating new organisms entirely is not within the government's best interest, most likely from an ethical view, and thus it manifests itself in law. Next is heritable human genome editing, which is the process of modifying human embryos in a way that passes changes to future generations. This could cause descendancy problems, which is why it is forbidden. Thirdly, unapproved GMO releases, which is when genetically modified crops or animals can't be released into the environment without authorization. Rather self-explanatory, the government just doesn't want environmental issues stemming from unapproved GMOs, which links into the fourth reason of gene drives, which is when individuals force genetic changes for entire populations, like eliminating disease-carrying insects. And again, the government just wants to avoid any biological issues within the country that could have serious everlasting effects. And finally, there's human cloning, which is quite obvious as to why it's not allowed.
And the penalties for breaking these laws are pretty serious, right?
Absolutely. Depending on the violation, penalties can include the maximum statutory fine, which is unlimited, license revocation, equipment seizures, and even prison sentences of up to 10 years, especially for things such as human cloning.
So this is what I find surprising. No one has actually been prosecuted for breaking these laws in the UK, which is unusual and also quite surprising for such a tightly regulated field.
Yeah, you're right, Mars. Despite having strict laws, enforcement is not as aggressive as one might expect. Audits for genetically modified seeds, for example, are actually voluntary. Some companies, and to give an example, like Mole Seed UK Limited, have skipped audits multiple times, yet no action has been taken against them.
So who's actually in charge of regulating all of this?
So to break it down, it's spread over multiple agencies. The Animal and Health Plant Agency in charge of plants and crops. Human embryos are controlled by the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority. And Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency are in control of medicines and healthcare. Lastly, workplace safety is controlled by the Health and Safety Agency.
Okay, so moving on from that. Right now, the UK follows a trust-based system, meaning regulators expect companies to follow the rules rather than actively policing them. Some would argue that we should switch to a more enforcement-driven model. So what's your take?
So yeah, that's absolutely right. The government follows a compliance assurance model in which we expect companies to just follow the guidelines without actually having to pursue them on them. Personally, I think there should be slightly stricter rules with potential enforcement being needed. As we enter a time of more modern technology, these processes do need to be checked, and so I think there's definitely an argument for further restrictions to be introduced.
But on the other hand, some say stricter rules could slow innovation, especially in industries like medicine and agriculture.
Well, yeah, that's the problem and dilemma we have to navigate as a country. More regulation protects public safety, but too much can hinder scientific progress.
Looking ahead, how do you see the UK's approach evolving?
Right now, the UK is less strict than the EU, but more restricted than the US, so around somewhere in the middle. But I think over the next decade, we'll see rules gradually loosened to encourage biotech investment. So in general, expect to see Americanization of the rules as they become less stringent, like the US.
What kind of changes would we see?
Potentially removing mandatory labelling of gene-edited foods, more research approvals for CRISPR-based gene editing, and more GMOs in agriculture.
So to wrap things up, where do you think the UK should draw the line?
I think moderation is key. We need to support innovation in areas like medicine and agriculture, but at the same time there must be clear ethical boundaries, especially when dealing with human genetics and environmental risks.
So the big question remains, should the UK trust companies to regulate themselves, or should the government take a stronger enforcement role?
That's definitely a debate that will shape the future of genetic technology and synthetic biology for decades.
Thank you so much, Zach, for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to our listeners, and make sure to watch out for our next podcast.